talk about being osek in kiruv, osek in sarkit tzibur, and having a shpa, there are many facets that go into us having hatzlacha. There's our yidiyas Torah, just pashut what we know, our yidiyas Torah, our kesher Torah, which is the ikr. There's our clarity and hashkafa, our confidence, our ability to connect with people. There's our personality, charisma, our presentation. But there's one nakuda which seems to penetrate more than other nakudas. That's the nakuda that we call devar mayotzim min halev. Things that come from our heart. In other words, caring. Really being genuine and caring about what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're approaching. The words of the Balei Musar call this noseh ba'ol im chaveru. Someone's noseh ba'ol. He carries the ol with his friend. The truth is, we're talking in a kiruv seminar, in a seminar for our Batzos Torah, but this idea in Yiddishkeit is not just relevant to Beit Am L'Chaveru, when we're working with people in that context. It's a yesod that really encaptures all of Yiddishkeit. There's a really beautiful idea that Rav Shimshon Pincus at Tzal is masbir. He has one of his not as well-known svarim called Tiferes Torah, has small vortlech on the parsha, and he has a hagdama to the sefer. In this hagdama, Rav Shimshon tries to sum up his essence of what he thinks Yiddishkeit's all about. And he says, what is Yiddishkeit? Yiddishkeit is really Krisis Bris with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And when did that ultimately take place? By Maimon Har Sinai. All the events leading up to that, the Galus Mitzrayim, the Asar Makos, the whole process getting to Har Sinai was to get to that point of Maimon Har Sinai, that Krisis Bris with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But he says there's a very interesting pasuk at that Maimon Har Sinai, at the Hagdama to Maimon Har Sinai, that he says we can learn a lot from. Says Rav Shimshon, what's the psukim there? As we get to Har Sinai, we get to Midbar Sinai, the psukim say, B'chodesh hashlishi letzeis b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, when Klal Yisrael finally came, B'yom hazeh bo Midbar Sinai. Moshe ole Elokim, vayikra elav Hashem min hahar. Moshe goes up to the Bon Shalom, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu calls out to him in the Har Lemor, Kos somar leveis Yaakov v'saged levnei Yisrael. Tell this to Klal Yisrael. This is the beginning. Avada, Klal Yisrael saw Hashem's Yad Chazaka, the Nisim in Mitzrayim, and we certainly, Kaviyachal, got to know their Bon Shalom. We got to be Maki the Bon Shalom when we were in Mitzrayim. But this was a new darga, a new level of our connection with the Bon Shalom that was going to take place at Maimon Har Sinai. And Hashem Kaviyachal was introducing himself to Klal Yisrael, telling Moshe Rabbeinu, tell this to Klal Yisrael. What was the first message he wanted to tell to Klal Yisrael? Atim re'isim asher asisi leMitzrayim. You saw what I did to Mitzrayim. You Klal Yisrael, saw what I did to Mitzrayim. Asked Rav Shimshon, what's the relevance? I don't get the message. After all this time waiting to almost meet the Bon Shalom, as we did at Har Sinai, panim upanim. This is the first message that the Bon Shalom is sending to Klal Yisrael. You saw what I did to Mitzrayim. What do we learn from this? What's the message here? The message is that what did Hashem do to Mitzrayim? Hashem created the world with chukei teva. But in Mitzrayim, he was mahapik that. He turned it upside down. He turned all the mayim to dam. He brought kinim, barad, everything. He turned the whole world upside down. Why? Because he saw what Mitzrayim did to Klal Yisrael. He saw what Mitzrayim did to his Klal Yisrael. And that's why he started off saying, Atim re'isim, asher asisi leMitzrayim. You saw what I did to Mitzrayim. Why? Because I saw what they did to you. Mashal lamad davar darma. What's this a mashal for? It says, take a father who waited quite a while to have a child. And his father's more of a soft-spoken individual, more of an edel person. And he takes his son to the park for the first time. He's sitting on the bench, Shepi Nachas, watching his son play, go in the sandbox, go up the slide, take the swing, and all of a sudden a few of the local bullies come along, take the son, push him right off the swing, face falls flat into the sand, the son's crying. Well, meanwhile, this very soft-spoken, introverted father all of a sudden has steam coming out of his nose that he never even realized he had before. Why? Because someone's violating his son. Rav Shimshon says that when the Rebbe Hashem saw what the Mitzrim did to us, he cared. And this message is the first thing as we're being cursed of bris with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to send us a message that I care. I care. I care about you. And he says that's the Yesod of Yiddishkeit. The Psukim following this describe the essence of the bris. And the Psukim go on and say, V'esa eschem al kanfin nisharim v'avi eschem elai v'ata im shemo etishmu b'koli yushmartem es brisi v'isem li segula mikol oamim kili kol haaretz v'atem tiyuli mamleches kohanim v'goy kodesh. This is the essence of Yiddishkeit. Who Klal Yisrael is. But the Hagdama to that is he wanted us to know he cares. So it's the Yesod of Yiddishkeit, but it certainly is nogeya to our topic today of Kiruv, of Harbatas Torah, of working with people. Rav Chaim Friedlander, in the Sefer Sifsei Chaim, is moned three dargas, three madregas of what it means to work with people, what it means to be involved with people. He says the first madrega of being mative, of giving to other people, is the Maila, what he calls the Maila Tzedakah. What's the Maila Tzedakah? You see there's something chaser, something's lacking in someone else, and you take it upon yourself to be mamala that. You fill that lack. It requires a hisboneness, a contemplation of what's lacking, and a ratzon to go ahead and fill that lack. That's the Maila Tzedakah. There's a second Maila which is even higher than that. What's that Maila? The Maila that he calls chesed. This chesed, this Maila of chesed is lav dafka, dependent on whether the person needs or not that actual act. Because you can add something, you can help something with someone, even though they have plenty of people to help set up, but just your presence there, it's an action mitzad the person who's going about the chesed. That person has a shaykhs to this Maila called chesed. So he says, this is even a higher dark, and he brings the Maharal, explains the Gemara in Sukkah, of Mem Tes Amud Beis, when he says, Gemilas chasadim afla ashirin, even for rich people. Because Gemilas chasadim is about the goymel chesed, the person himself who's doing the chesed. And he says there's a third madrega, an even higher level of working with people. What's that madrega? He calls it noise ba'olim chavera. He maila el yona al kulona. It's the highest of all madregas in terms of our ability to interact and be mative, to do good for other people. Shaba eina noise mistapik ba'anakas toivas lizulosoi. We're not satisfied with just doing a good tova, doing a good deed, doing a good meiser for the other person. The person gives himself. He gives his ani, his self over to the person. He identifies with this friend. It's much higher than just doing an action. He identifies with this friend. And he feels himself as a shutav, as a partner with the tsar chavero, as if that was his own personal tsar. And he also feels himself to be a shutav, to be a partner in his friend's simcha. It could be that these three levels, I was thinking about it, might actually correspond to the three different mitzvahs of Hayyom on Purim. There's the mitzvah of Matanas Levyonim, which is where you see someone who's lacking something and you give that matana to that person. There's the mitzvah of Mishloach Manas, where it's lav dafka that the person, your neighbor, is probably not missing any more vafalim in their closet, especially Erev Pesach. But it's not about the vafalim. It's about you wanting to show your neighbor a message that I care. I'm here with you. I want to be the kind of person that gives and gives and gives and gives. And perhaps the Sudas Purim, the Mishta V'Simcha, is Nichnas Yain Yatzasod, is where our hargeshim, our feelings come out, and the people who we're with, who were involved in that Mishta, could be that creates a certain chibur or care where we really feel a certain achdus as the Purim comes to its height. Where do we find this idea of Nosa B'ol? in the Torah. So Chaim Friedlander is masbir that the place we see this first is in Sefer Shmos with Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk says over there, beginning of Sefer Shmos, Vayhi b'yomi mahem, vayigdal Moshe vayetze alechav vayar b'sivloisim. Moshe went out. He was yigdal. He grew up. Vayetze alechav. He went out to his brothers. Vayar b'sivloisim, and he saw their sevel, their pain, their suffering. Rashi says, "Vayigdal Moshe." Rashi says, "V'halo kvar kosav vayigdal yeled." It already says this. So what's the Torah coming to teach us? It says Rashi, "Shemineu paro al beiso." Paro was mamana Moshe on his house. Okay, that Moshe Rabbeinu was in charge at a very young age of the whole Armon of Paro. Why is the Torah teaching us this? It says Rav Chaim Friedlander to show us that Moshe Rabbeinu did not grow up in his formative years in an environment that he was exposed to tsar and sevel and difficulty and challenge. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth in the house of Paro. And afal pikein, what does the pasuk say? Vayetze alechav. He went out to his brethren at a young age. What caused him to do that? His tichunas hanefesh, the tichunas that Moshe Rabbeinu had himself, he was drawn towards this. And the pasuk which really describes the idea of nosei b'ol chaveru, the last part of the pasuk, vayar b'sivloisim. He saw their suffering. What does Rashi say? Nasan einav. He put his eyes, v'libo, in his heart, lios meitzar leim, to be in tsar on them. Nosei b'ol, Moshe Rabbeinu was mizbonin on what's going on with Klal Yisrael, and he felt the tsar. He went out, and he felt the tsar. The first act of being nosei b'ol is recognizing that someone else is in tsar. This is not an easy thing to do. This is not an easy thing to do. And the truth is, this and some of the yesodis we're going to talk about today, that we're going to learn a little about today, about nosei b'ol, is not just relevant to when we work in kiruv, or when we give a shir, or when we're a mashkiach, or a menahel, or we're fundraising, or whatever the role that we might be doing. It's really nogea to every single relationship we have in our lives, whether it's family, friends, neighbors, kavrusas. So great. So let's be misbonin. We'll see the tsar of someone else, and we'll be nosei b'ol. Sounds pretty straightforward. So there's obviously quite a challenge in this. And this challenge interferes with our ability to do the very thing that we came here to do today, to get chizuk in our ability to be mekayim, the inyan of Harbatas Torah, of kiruv rechokim, kiruv krovim, rabbanis, everything that goes into this. And this is almost a prerequisite towards that, even though it's, on the one hand, a very high madrega being nosei b'ol. On the other hand, it's worth thinking, if we can't see someone else, how are we going to start? So what's the challenge here? Rav Chaim Friedlander is masbir. He says as follows, Ha'adam mitzad tivo, a person from his own teva, misanyen ba'atzma lelo heref. He thinks about himself relentlessly. We're consumed with ourselves relentlessly. If we really think about it, we'll see how our own sense of self, it totally consumes a person. It involves a person entirely. Even when we think about someone else, it's mixed in our machshava. Our own self is in there, even when we're thinking about someone else. When you do chesed with someone, you think about yourself. What toelis, what benefit can I have from this act? That's when we're doing an act of chesed. Upamim, and he says, sometimes we even actually can explicitly say this. What's going to be the benefit for me? What's in it for me? That's how the saying goes. What's in it for me? And in another place, he masbir the challenge of being noseh ba'ol. He says, "B'derech klal ha'einayim mishar sois es ha'adam l'tzrachim shaloi." Our eyes serve us for our own individual reasons, our own individual purposes. Ba'ofen TV hu roi hakol min nekudas hamabat shel atzmo. Naturally, we see everything that we look at through our mabat of ourselves, to the perspective from ourselves. V'gam k'shechoshev azulos. When we think about someone else, kivun ha'machshava, the direction of our machshava, hu biyachas elav. Einu sholas atzmo ma'u yochel lahoil l'sheni. We don't ask ourselves naturally, but teva, what can we do for that person? Ela mahu yochel lahoil la'atzmo. What can I gain from this act? I think if we think about these words and understand what's going on here, Be'ezus Hashem, I hope in the short time we have to be able to come out with a little more of an understanding of what goes into this important task and what we could possibly do to at least make some headway, so that whatever the interaction might be, again, in any of our roles, and any interaction you have with another yid is beinam lechavero, is a bechin of kiruv, whatever it is that you're sharing with the person, is certainly will help our ability to elevate our quality of our ability to be noseh ba'ol. Let's take the first thing he says. Ha'adam mitzad tivo misyanen ba'atzmo lelo herif. A person in his teva thinks about himself relentlessly. Im nisbonen heitev, and if we think about it, we can see our anochia shebo masiko oso b'tmidius. We're consumed with our own self. I once heard someone say that each person lives in three worlds: me, myself, and I. Right? These are the three worlds we live in. But who of us, certainly I include myself, the head of the list, don't spend quite a significant amount of time throughout our day, our waking hours, maybe even sometimes our sleeping hours, depending what our dreams are about, but that's for different shmuz, wondering if we're successful, wondering if we're steiging, wondering if we're accomplishing, wondering if we're popular, wondering if we're happy, wondering what's missing in my life. Right? Many psychologists have made a living from one concept alone that's called FOMO. Right? And this FOMO was a concept, I'm not sure exactly who introduced it, but it's an acronym for fear of missing out. Right? It's such a deep fear in a person that maybe I'm missing out on something. So who doesn't spend time thinking, what am I missing? What is my home missing? What are my children missing? What's my learning missing? What's my parnasa missing? This makes it quite hard to get out of ourselves. So this is one aspect of just recognizing what Rav Chaim Friedlander means, that a person is totally involved with himself. We probably don't even realize we're doing this most of the time. But these are a lot of the things that go into our thoughts and consume us throughout our day. And obviously, it speaks for itself why this would be a bit of an impediment to be noseh ba'ol. Because if this is what's going on in our head, then it's going to be hard when we sit down with someone, when someone turns to us for eitzah, for a dracha, for guidance in life, this might be a bit of an impediment. I must say, when I read the words that everything a person sees, even when someone comes to him for help, he sees from his own perspective and thinks about himself. I was made aware of a story that happened right here in this base midrash, of an example where it's possible to not do that. Whoever is connected with the Or Sameach family for some time remembers the Mishkiach of Dovid Spires, Zatzal, who sat here hours and hours, years and years, doing whatever he could for any Talmud that came to the door, for the yeshiva in general. So Talmud said that he once went to speak to Rabbi Spire, and he was going through a difficult time in something. And the Talmud started talking, sharing what was going on. And as this Talmud looked up to Rabbi Spire, he saw Rabbi Spire's tears flowing from his face. And the Talmud said he was just nespoil. He couldn't believe that he himself wasn't crying. But yet, it had just been about a minute or two of telling over what was going on to Rabbi Spire, that Rabbi Spire's face was full of tears. I had the schus of knowing Rabbi Spire a little bit. He wasn't someone who thought about other people. He had the ability, he wasn't someone who thought about himself. He had the ability to think about other people. And that story really shows that. So while the makor for this is Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayar b'siv loisim, this is something which people can aspire to, people can grasp, and certainly everything on its madrega. But it reminded me very much of that story that I heard. So what's the challenge? One of the challenges here is, if we're so consumed with ourselves, how are we possibly going to do this? There's another component to the challenge. He says, even when the first challenge is just what we do all the time with ourselves, but the second challenge is even when we're sitting with someone, when we're interacting with someone, there's another aspect of the challenge. And this is really twofold. When we look at people, we look at them from the mabat of ourselves. What does that mean? That instantly and instinctually and immediately, as soon as we see someone else, very often we're immediately sizing that other person up. We're trying to assess the situation. You walk into a simcha, you walk into you're meeting a new chavrusa, a new shir, a new job, a shidduch, whatever the setting is, and we have this amazing capacity to size up the situation in mamish 3 seconds. And we'll look for any clues to help us do that. And we're assessing our own, how threatened are we? Where is this person clapping me? We're assessing, what's the person wearing? How chashav are they? Where are they coming from? Where are they clapping me? Are they more from? Are they less from? Are they cooler? Are they not? Whatever the essence is, we have this ability, as soon as we start interacting with someone, there's a tendency sometimes to immediately touch the person up relative to who I am and where I am. It's assessing the threat that this person has to me from our own insecurities of where do I stand. So again, if you think about our tafkid here that we're talking about today, being noseh ba'ol, when you sit down with someone, and sometimes it helps when you're in the position of being the rav or the mashpia, right? Or the person in a little bit of a higher chair, so it maybe balances it out a little bit, but nonetheless it happens. So if we have this natural tendency to do this, how might that interfere with when we're sitting with people, when people turn to us for help, when we're interacting with interacting people? It's again, another expression of being consumed with ourselves. And there's one other element of this. In the actual act of helping, this first thing of sizing people up happens even before we even start. But when someone turns to us, comes to us for her dracha, comes to us for an eitzah, wants to learn from us, there's another challenge. We all have she'ifas. Anyone who's going into or is currently involved in her batzas Torah, in kiruv, have she'ifas to be matzliach, to be mashpia, to give over, to help people. We have a ratzon, we have she'ifas. The ratzon is who we are as people. So what happens when the people who are turning to us for help actually challenge this? When our ratzon to help, to say, to affect people, to influence people, to move people from point A to point B to point C actually gets challenged, what happens to us as people? There's always the guy who comes to you for an eitzah, and he comes to you for lots of eitzahs. He wants a lot of advice. Yet it seems that each time you give him a suggestion or good eitzah, he seems to always have a reason why he resists that eitzah. Didn't really go with it. He's not sure. Could not be the right time. Maybe he wants to speak to another person. So after about 10, 11, 12 times of doing this, right, do you think you're going to be impacted come the 12th, 13th time? And when you sit down with this guy, how are you going to feel towards him? Why? Because he's sharing me. I have good advice. I'm giving my time to him. I want to help him. And he's interfering with it. Chutzpah, right? So I might, unless we're holding on these madregas, be impacted by that. Come the 8th time, 9th time, 10th time, maybe my ratzon to help him, maybe my patience level, maybe my sever panim yafas towards this person when he comes to me might be impacted. How about the guy who you prepare a gavaldik shir and whatever, daf yomi, ashkafa shir, halacha shir, and Baruch Hashem, this guy has questions, and he has more questions and questions, and you can't get through one point of the shir without 3 questions, another question, another question. He's interfering with the shir, he's distracting other people, right? All of a sudden you start to get a little, you know yourself getting a little less patient with this guy, a little more agitated. Why? Maybe it's coming from a character defect in him, it could be, but what does that have to do with me? But again, he's interfering with, I have a she'ifa, I have a matar, I have a goal here. I want to get this shir going. I want the people in the shir to like this shir. So what happens to us when we're put in these type of situations, which are ma'asim b'chol yom in the field of Habatzis Torah? How about the guy on campus, Kiruv, who you've been working on, learning with him, being makar of him, inviting him for Shabbos the whole year, and it comes time you're taking him for the JLE and or Sameach, and he signed up and he actually brought 3 friends along. And at the last minute, you get an email from him saying that they found cheaper tickets to Mexico and they're not coming. So come next semester, it's time to learn with him again. How many of us think we're going to come in with the same enthusiasm, the same simcha, the same care? Because one second, I had numbers to fill. You're interfering with my agenda to bring a plane packed with people to Eretz Yisrael. So again, how are we going to respond to that? And how are we not going to let that interfere with our ability to be noticeable, to connect with this person, to really give over ourselves? Or the donor who this year reduced his donation 2/3 because he's making a chasna, and not just a chasna to not be forgotten about. Right? And you got an invitation, but that's not what you were looking for in the mail. Right? And this was a chasna, but what about your campus kiruv, your shul, whatever it is that you're working with him? So come the next time you interact with him, are you going to be at the same ability to greet him warmly? And he turns to you for help, we know sabol. What's the common denominator? The tzad hashava between all these different scenarios is that the ani that Rav Chaim Friedlander is talking about, I have a ratzon, I have a she'ifa, I have a mission, I have something that I want, and these different scenarios are interfering, they're being mafriyah. He says a lashon, "K'dei liyos noseh ba'ol." In order to be noseh ba'ol, tzarich lehishtacher mikol zika shel anochias. You have to free yourself from any connection with yourself. V'lichios es azulas, and to live the other person, like the story we talked about with Rabbi Spires itself. But certainly, when these things happen, it's going to be very hard to be lishtachrer, to free ourselves mikol zika shel anochias. Free ourselves from any shevitz of ani. So we'll have to be mavatal or ratzon. How do we do this? We have to be mavatal or ratzon. We have a ratzon for certain things, and it doesn't mean, therefore, we shouldn't have a ratzon to continue teaching and giving over these people and helping them. But in certain scenarios, we have to become aware of what it means that even though my ratzon is for this, in this particular scenario, my tafki right now is to be able to put my ratzon aside and do what I need to do for that person. Lichios es azulas, to live the other person. Being mavatal or ratzon is not an easy thing to do. I mean, we have stories, can be nogay to anything, right? The famous story with Rav Moshe, who was not a young Rav at the time and got his frail hand slammed in the heavy door of a Cadillac on the way to a simcha. And basically, from what I understood, was able to be sholit on himself, exhibited an incredible amount of self-control of not showing any tsar until he got out of the car, because as to not shame the driver who did it. Or the story of Yaakov Kamenetsky, who after the patir of his Rebbetzin, I think during the Shiva, after the Shiva, one of his daughters, as he was accustomed to eat every morning, brought him eggs, and she noticed the eggs didn't get touched. And after clarifying what was going on, maybe she thought she didn't make it the same way her mother did. Her mother made him eggs every day. He finally told his daughter, I actually don't like eggs. But that wasn't nogeya, because his wife made him eggs and he ate the eggs. So these are stories of Anashim Gedolim. I also tell it's a cute story, but it's a real story. It's a multifaceted story of the Yiddish Kaddish from Pshischa. And it was known that the Yid HaKadosh had a wife who didn't let anything go and really gave him a hard time. No matter what time of day it was, she really gave him a Misha Berach. And one time, Kachava, this was happening, and his Talmud of Simcha Bunim from Pshischa was there, watching this happen. And he was spoiled from a chance to see my Rabbi. Bishoisik, he was quiet, he stood there, nothing moved. And so, all of a sudden, the Yid HaKadosh actually gave his wife a Misha Berach right back. Shelo Kedarko. He went out of his gather, and he started really giving her back to her, yelling at her. And she back to him, and he back to her. And when this whole thing was finished, he left the house, and his Heilige Talmud of Simcha Bunim asked him, Rabbi, ma yomi yomayim, what happened here? And he said to him, well, it's Pashut. But derech halam shoysek, I'm quiet. I saw, though, that today, Punkt, my shtika was causing her so much tsar that I figured I'd give it back to her and make it lighter for her. That was the nice thing. But you see, even someone in such a situation was so able to be sholet on his ratzon to defend himself. With what the Mesilas Yesharim says is such a deep, deep ratzon that when we're insulted or hurt, it's so zis, it's so sweet, says the Mesilas Yesharim, to get the person back. And he uses the lush, you almost have to be a malach to be able to achieve such a thing. There's one more story I have to tell that I saw recently from Rav Abba Berman Zatzal. And this really, it was prior to the chuppah of one of his daughters. And as he was sitting with the Mechutanim, the father of the chassan, he suggested someone he'd like to be mechaber under the chuppah. And the father of the chassan took one look at this person's name and says, B'shum panav ofen, there's no way possible this man is standing under my chuppah. This person has caused such tsar to my family. So Abba Berman asked him, no, what's his geshem? What happened? He tells him, he says, it's nothing. You should think what he did to my family. And he says, and that's dafka why at each of my kids' chasnas, I'm careful to be mechaber with the bracha and the chuppah. To show him that one thing has nothing to do with the other. So who's on that madrega? These are stories that happened. He would dafka ask this person, this is a kid's chasna, once in a lifetime. And he was mechaber this person, the chuppah, to try to work on himself and show no sign of this. Lichios es azulas. Depending on the nusach we daven, if it's daily, if it's once in a while, in the Ashamnu Bagad news, when we come to Yud, it's Yatznu Ra. We gave bad advice. That's for anyone. It's not just people working in Harbat Torah, not just people working in Kiruv. What's bad advice? Says the Mesilas Yesharim in Perach Yud Aleph, Al titen lo eitza she'ena hogenes lo. Don't give an eitza that's not good for the person. Shebein b'davar she'yochol lios nogea bo, whether it's something which is nogea to us, bein b'davar she'ena nogea bo klal, whether it's not nogea to us at all, chayiv adam lahamid es haba li'yisyayitz bo, a person's obligated to relate to the person who's coming to him for eitza, ala emes hazach v'habar. He says, ach zois hi choivas ha'adam ha'yasher. This is a chovas of a person who's yasher. Kasher yavo ish li'yisyayitz bo. When a person comes to take eitza from you, yatzeo eitza shehayu hu notel la'atzmo mamish. Take the eitza that you would take for yourself, mamish. Mibli sheyashkiv ba ela latoivaso shel hamisyayitz. Only looking at what's beneficial for the person coming for eitza. Lo l'shum tachas acher korov arachok shiyeh. Not for any other purpose. So how do we do this? How do we start to work on this? Because when people come to us for eitzah, they're also coming and they're bringing themselves to that eitzah. Whether it's what we talked about, that we're sizing them up because we don't like how they look. We don't like how they talk. It's uncomfortable for us because they're perhaps a bit socially awkward. Or they're challenging us too much. Or they're interfering with us. So how do we mekayim, or at least have a shaykhis to the words of the Mesilas Yesharim here, to the words of Chaim Friedlander? L'hishtachrer, to free ourselves, mikol zika shel anochias. and to be mekayim this idea of noseh b'olim chavero, so that our habatzas Torah, our kiruv, rechokim, krovim, whatever we're osikin, we can do it with more eiches, with more quality to it. So there's the important yesod of the chinuch that says, achrei ha'pa'ulos nimshachan halavavos, that if we do maisim again and again and again to try and be margil, accustom ourselves towards this type of mindset, this type of approach, this type of way of being, that certainly is going to have an effect on our heart. Perhaps it might be helpful given the fact that we're living in a generation where the anochia seems to have grown exponentially. And the nisyonos of our dor, of the people who, first of all, for ourselves, and for the people we'll be helping, has intensified, given the gashmias of the dor, given all the nisyonos that come along with it. Perhaps we can add something in addition to obviously the words of the chinuch, that perhaps, based on what we spoke about today, the beginning of noseh b'ol, says Chaim Friedlander, his boneness in the other person, of what the other person is going through. I'd like to add that the beginning of it, the beginning of the beginning, is his boneness in ourselves. Of what would happen to me in these scenarios that we mentioned today. What does happen to me when I feel challenged by someone, when I'm uncomfortable by someone? When someone's agenda doesn't stim with my agenda. When I feel someone's interfering with me, with my ruts and with my sheifas. What happens to me? What gets triggered in me? What are my reactions? Why are they that way? And going through our own process of self-awareness that will help us to then be able to, in a certain sense, the words of the chinuch, we can almost call the aseh tov, doing more pu'ulas. But the sur me'raz, before it even starts, getting an awareness, beginning to uproot a little bit, shave away at these things inside of us, that from the get-go, as soon as we see the person, as soon as we hear the person, or it's that same person again who did this last time, who doesn't anyways take my advice, he always goes to another rabbi. And it's my precious time to do the work that we need to do on ourselves, to remove at least a layer, or 2 or 3 of that. Be aware of what might happen. We're not going to become malachim. I certainly won't. And we're not going to be able to mevatel all of our ritzonos that interfere here, but with an awareness, what we can do is, as it's happening b'shas maisa, when someone is challenging us, when it's interfere with our ability to be meitiv, to be noseh b'ol, to do chesed, we can at least do that action with an awareness that I see myself getting a little frustrated, impatient, judgmental, annoyed, and find a very convenient way to kind of put that in my back pocket and keep going forward. And that, I believe, will help us qualitatively be able to makayim these madregas, the madregas of tzedakah, the madregas of chesed, the madregas of noseh b'ol. I think it's certainly fitting on Shivas Batamas that the Chorban Bayis, the Sinus Chinam, that was so much a siba, part of the Chorban, perhaps being noseh b'ol might be almost an exact opposite response to that. Is that I was thinking about sinus chinam, and I think it's traditionally translated as baseless hatred. Perhaps we can alter the translation a little bit, because after our talk today, it's really not baseless. There's actually a very good basis for the sinna. It's this person is staring me. There's a real basis for it. I have a real rutzin to do something, and this person is interfering with that. And so my hisnagdus, my resistance, is actually not baseless. So what might be the type of sinus chinam? Might be unjustified hatred. Why does this person have to suffer from my own shortcomings? It's unjustified hatred. It's real sinus chinam. That's what Chazal call it. But in terms of the nafkamina being, if you ever put out an English translation, right, you might want to think twice about, is it baseless hatred or is it unjustified hatred? But either way you slice it, certainly our ability to be mizbonin, kodem kol on ourselves, of what interferes, what inside of us interferes with our ability to be noseh ba'ol. Gaining an awareness of that. And then trying to walk in the ways of Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayar b'sivloisam. Seeing someone else as they come to us for help. Be'ezus Hashem, by doing these two pu'ulas, these two actions, we will do our part to respond to the sin of chinam, and Be'ezus Hashem bring the Gula Shlema B'mehera V'meinu Amen.